Welcome back. We're coming to you today from the headquarters of Certified Angus Beef here in Ohio to talk about the relationship between the corn and beef industries. And Brandon, I want to start with you. I mean, we talk a lot about sustainability in the beef industry. From a corn grower's perspective, how important is sustainability and what impact it's going to have in terms of how we manage our farms going forward?
You know, sustainability is constantly on our mind as a corn farmer. You know, we start at the core of sustainability of long-term within the farming generations itself. You know, we have farmers on here, or fifth generation farmers. That's a sustainable goal. And to make that work, we have to develop more sustainable practices on the farm. So we're constantly looking at ways to decrease fertilizer usage, to decrease water usage on our own farms. How can we add in cover crops? What's the next wave out there, whether it's carbon markets, whatever those cases are. And how does that play in, not just to our own markets on our own farms, but in the long-term sustainability of beef cattle as well? How is it we can work together in that systematic approach to say, okay, what we're doing is sustainable, what they're doing is sustainable. Let's marry them together to make a high-quality product down the road that ultimately will keep farmers in business for long term.
So I'm curious, I mean, is sustainability something that just large commercial growers need to focus on? Is it something that's more appropriate for small or organic growers? I mean, does it depend on size? What's your perspective?
You know, the sustainability perspective, it's all sizes of every farm, and everybody's going to approach it a little bit different just because of scale. But like coming from Nebraska, one of our key sustainability metrics is irrigation. You know, we're farming in areas of ground that are 80 acres big, 160 acres big, 600 acres big. And what is that water sustainability? How is that we can make sure we keep the Ogallala aquifer for the long term? You know, we don't want to have happen what we see in other parts where we're running out of water. So that's from our perspective, whether it's I'm a 500 acre farmer or 14,000 acre farmer in Nebraska, that's very important.
And water is maybe not as big an issue here in Ohio as it is in Nebraska, but sustainability important to corn growers in Ohio as well.
Absolutely, because you go from a concept of, like you said, large farmers versus smaller acre farmers here in this side of the country. We're more utilizing our land. For example, we're double cropping hay and corn in same years on same farms. We're diversifying operations. Like mine, we have a grain operation. I wanted to come back to the farm after college, so we kind of added in the cattle aspect to our farm. That's sustainable, so that way I can make sure I was able to come back to be a fifth generation farmer on our family farm. So.
And I think one thing I want to add on top of that, as we're looking at the size of farmers, and Ben brought up a good point that you have farmers that want to come back, and as we add in these sustainable practices, so maybe it's adding in cover crops, and so you have a small cattle herd, and so you can bring them out on your cover crops, which then has a soil health benefit that is long term. It's just that process that works together, which will ultimately lead to better crop production from a corn standpoint.
I think one thing that's interesting, sustainability has been a hot buzzword in the media and in politics, but the reality is farmers have been implementing sustainability practices for some time, right? Tell us about some of the ways, Brandon, you've already improved your sustainability footprint.
I think it's very important to look at what farmers are doing. We're continually making changes. We only can work with what we know at the time. So a lot of times people look back and say, hey, well, you were doing it this way back 45 years ago. Well, we begin to see the data that shows that, hey, we're making improvements. We're constantly making these changes that are decreasing the amount of fertilizer it takes to produce a bushel of corn, that are decreasing the amount of water that's taken to produce a bushel of corn, that's decreasing the amount of land area to produce a bushel of corn. And those are vitally important, and we continue along that path. And as we're looking to the next wave of the future is what are those next areas that we can keep increasing corn production and at the same time making sure it's a more high quality product than it even is today. So then ultimately it gets back to, as we talk about feeding high quality beef, that has a very important factor at the end term as well.
And speaking of beef, Don, I mean, you would agree that the beef industry has made lots of improvements in terms of sustainability, even before this topic came to national forefront. Would you agree?
Yeah, and that's the interesting point is there's a little resistance about sustainability and engaging it. The reality is we've been doing sustainability for a long time, and we're actually very good at it. Because really, sustainability success equals increased performance, increased efficiencies. And if you look at what farmers and ranchers have done the last 2 or 3 decades, boy, they tip your hat to them. From an efficiency standpoint, they got the sustainability award.
It's a journey, right? I mean, sustainability, I mean, we've talked about generations. It began, years and years ago, and it continues today, and we're constantly trying to identify different approaches and different methods to improve, whether it's corn production, cattle production, to meet the ultimate objective of improved environment and consumer demand.
Bruce, that's such a great point, because in our research for our sustainability goals, we looked at a period 1980 to 2015, and I started farming in 1980. Just this year, planted the family's 42nd corn crop. Wow. But in 1980, I didn't think any consumer or anybody really cared about what I did. But today, everybody cares. And truthfully, they did, but the 80s were a really rough period economically. And so you talk about a driving force, there are three legs here. Sustainability has economics, that has the consumer-facing portion of it, and it has the environmental-facing portion of it. So when we look at that 1980 period, it was so hard to scrape an earning. We had to do things very efficiently, and we learned that that rewarded us, and that is why we have seen the success that you've referenced in this journey, in this time, and that's why we'll be able to do it going forward, because economics will drive it. But that social sustainability is a big part of it. We need to respect the consumer in all this. They deserve a choice, and if they want to understand that we're producing sustainably on the feed side of it, the corn input side of it, and you're doing it on the beef side, they really do want to hear that story. So that behooves us to really get that out there.
Well, I really appreciate the way you've all addressed it as a journey, because it is a journey, it's a process. We're focused on continual improvement, and that begins with helping farmers and ranchers understand some of the innovative practices that are going on that can improve our footprint, our environmental footprint, and our overall sustainability as you defined it. What are some of the things that NCGA is doing to inform and teach farmers about what they can do to improve sustainability?
Well, that process has been a journey as well. So for a few years now, we've had our Corn Sustainability Advisory Group, who has looked into what do we need to know to really understand where we came from and where we're headed. Part of that is in our report, and it's laid out very nicely, and I give those grower volunteers a lot of kudos, and the staff for really putting that together, and then establishing goals. So then it becomes the point for what you're making. How do you get growers to adopt new practices? You tie technology to them. You tie an economic benefit to them, and folks will see it. Because the cattle industry, you feed a lot of cattle. You don't do that without technology. And we don't raise a crop without technology. So I think that's going to be key in identifying those points of which really produce a benefit. And it feels like everything's beta at this point. So it's a bit of a struggle to get technology to produce results every time. But I think we're headed in the right directions. We're making those partnerships to make these things happen. And it's going to be a very concerted effort.
And Don, take that same question from a cattleman's perspective. What are we doing in the beef cattle industry to inform and onboard producers with tools and technologies that can improve their sustainability?
Step one is we're beginning the dialogue to make sure they're understanding sustainability and engaging in sustainability, and making sure they aren't as concerned about what it may or may not entail. As I said earlier, we've been the sustainability experts for a long time. Now it's just time to take it to the next level, set some goals that are meaningful, that we can translate back to our consumers to let them know this is an idea and a concept that we're fully engaged in and that we're taking it to the next level.
So Bruce, this brand is based on consumers. You talk to a lot of consumers as you market certified Angus beef, not just domestically, but around the world. What do consumers say about sustainability, and what is the message we need to send to them?
Great question, Kevin. When you look at industry research right now, and that attribute, sustainability, it's a big factor in purchasing decisions of consumers. Half that decision now is including sustainability. So our role, and Don mentioned it, is to capture that information of sustainability that has been going on for years and years and years. And our role as a brand right now is just to capture information relative to those practices that have been going on, and then provide that information in a transparent form that consumers can believe and trust. There's already a natural level of trust amongst consumers with producers. Yes. And so our role is communicating that information about what we are doing in terms of sustainability.
So John, I'd like to ask you the same question. I mean, what are you all doing from a corn grower's perspective to demonstrate and document and ultimately communicate with consumers about what you all are doing to improve sustainability in your operations?
It's a great story to tell, and we're focusing right now, because the landscape is in DC where policy is being established. So we're focusing on a reputation program that's pretty widespread media-wise in DC, but pulling it back into our states and letting our states talk to us about what they're doing in their state and how they're approaching growers, so we can kind of harvest that and come together to produce product that really reaches the grower. And bringing that consumer into the conversation is really key. And so we'll expand that further as we have that in a little better place to communicate out.
So for our audience sitting at home, I mean, what would be the 2 or 3 points you would want them to take away relative to the sustainability discussion and the kinds of things that they could share as they engage with either neighbors or consumers about this topic?
I think communication is key. Kudos to everything that you're doing at this point. It's phenomenal. That's what's got us here today. But we can be better. And I think each one of us probably has some ideas that maybe your neighbor doesn't know we're actually doing that actually works. And drop the guard a little bit on that competitive advantage and start talking about what's really going to make us good as a whole.
Again, as a consumer-facing brand, I mean, what are the 2 or 3 talking points that you all reference when the topic of sustainability comes up as it relates to certified Angus beef?
You look at the value that consumers place on environmental stewardship. Yes. And that's an attribute that all food products really haven't had to consider until this moment in time. And it's an attribute that we are adding to certified Angus beef. It's no longer just about great flavor or tenderness or the marbling that Ben's talked about. It's about what else can you provide to the family that goes beyond just the tangible attributes. What are the intangible attributes? Are we doing our part for their family, not just in terms of a quality diet, but a quality future related to the environment?
Don, as a leader of NCBA, I'm certain you get asked these questions by journalists and others. What are the 2 or 3 points you'd like to make relative to beef industry sustainability?
I think there's no doubt sustainability is in ranchers and farmers' DNA. I mean, all you have to do is look at how many multi-generation operations that exist, and sustainability is a message that resonates well with us. I think we just need to begin to explain what we're doing and how we're doing it, because the story is right. We are making huge improvements towards sustainability, so we just need to be a little crisper and talk about all the efficiencies and gains we've done. And again, it's a positive story for America.
It is a positive story, and we want to talk a little bit more about that when we return. Now, if you'd like to learn more about the National Corn Growers Association and its efforts to drive demand for corn growers, you can visit their website. That's ncga.com. And to keep up to date on beef sustainability efforts and other key issues, visit the website ncba.org. Still to come, we'll discuss some of the valuable environmental benefits that cattle provide when they're on the land. Don't go away. We'll have more right after this.
Stressors that trigger bovine respiratory disease are all around. So when you spot BRD in your herd, turn to Zuprevo, the fast that lasts. Zuprevo is rapidly absorbed in as little as 45 minutes and lasts up to 28 days. Because in the race against BRD, you need to win. Ready, set, Zuprevo. In case of human injection, seek immediate medical advice. For use in beef and non-lactating dairy cattle only. For prescribing information, talk to your veterinarian or visit Zuprevo.com.
If you're looking for outstanding forage-developed Angus cattle, look no further than Yon Family Farms in Ridge Springs, South Carolina. The Yon family is hosting their 18th annual fall sale on October 30th at 11 a.m. on their farm. They're offering 250 bulls and 100 females. proven genetics from a family committed to their customers. Find out more at janfamilyfarms.com.